Hey, what is up, my friends? Tom Henderson from RESGEN here, and I'm so excited you're back for another great conversation right here on the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Today's episode is a bit different from the usual format, but just like always, I know that you're going to find it extremely fruitful. Before we get into it, though, I quickly want to remind you that RESGEN's couples event, Date Night Comedy, is fast approaching. That's right, on February 27th and 28th, laughter will fill Central Church right here in Sioux Falls when comedian and pastor Ted Cunningham, alongside Jake Triplett, provide the perfect combination of hilarious comedy and relational enrichment. Both nights will be the same, so pick which night works best for you and plan on joining us for Date Night Comedy 2025. Tickets are only $25 per person and can be found at our website, resgen.org. All right, let's get into today's show, which, as I mentioned, is just a little different than usual. And what makes this episode unique? Because it's really more of a fireside chat between two brothers, me and my good friend, Jeff Lautt, who's the president of Poet here in Sioux Falls. What also makes it different is that we recorded it at the Poet office complex instead of in the RESGEN podcast studio. The reason we recorded it there is because Poet has been a great partner of RESGEN for almost 10 years now, and every year they invite me to speak to their employees and interns on a few different occasions. And this time, they asked if I would come onto their campus so Jeff and I could have an engaging discussion about several different topics with their staff in the audience. What topics? Finding your people, resisting isolation, relationship building, family communication, and mentorship. Jeff and I had a lot of fun sharing with the Poet team together, and I'm now excited to bring that conversation to you. I hope you enjoy this fireside chat between me and Jeff Lautt. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning.
This is good, man. This is super fun.
This is good. Yeah.
I love being invited to come and be a part of a company that finds value in gatherings like this. So first of all, thanks to Poet for being a company that obviously cares about doing your work really well. To the highest quality and with all excellence, but then also saying, hey, we want to make sure that we are caring for our people really well as well. So anyway, thanks for allowing me to be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. And, we love your organization, and Tom and I have a relationship outside of here. So we have a hard time if we ever have lunch or coffee containing it to less than an hour. There's always
it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah. I think I have high energy, and Tom's got me beat by a long shot.
Well, listen, I mean, this is your ship that I'm now all of a sudden, being invited on in this way. And the fun thing about these things is that I've been invited back now multiple times to be a part of Poet, which means I haven't screwed up so badly to not get another invitation.
Yeah.
And from everything from doing things for your interns each summer and speaking with your interns, to having a conversation just like this with Alyssa last year, and then even speaking at the event that you had for the leadership in October. And so, as I was thinking about just our conversation and the importance of relationships that we all have, and that's what Melissa was just speaking to, was the importance of relationships in a world where it's so simple to hide behind a screen, to isolate, and to just put out what you want people to think you are, as opposed to actually being who you really are. And the importance of relationship in fighting those types of things, and specifically longevity in relationships. And so I think that it'd be such maybe that'd be a good spot for us to talk about, is just even the how do we as people develop those kinds of relationships that are very forward facing and forward focused, to saying that we want to have those kinds of relationships in our lives. And especially in a day and age where a lot of us have come from nothing but broken relationships, which is how RESGEN initially started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's, you and I probably quite frankly don't know what it's like to grow up in today's technology world. Again, these are like very free flowing, raw thoughts. I started thinking, if I go back to my childhood, I'm a very relational person. And then I started thinking, okay, why am I a relational person? It's like, well, my family was much that way, especially my mom and her side of her family. But things were different back then too. So, um, we spent a lot of family time together. We didn't have today's technology. I mean, we had a TV that had 2 channels, and there wasn't usually much on. A few cartoons. I do watch cartoons, and like Gilligan's Island, and some of those classics. But if I was going to connect with somebody, a friend, the way we did that is we went to their house and knocked on their door.
Yeah.
And hey, is Chad home? Or can Bobby play? I mean, that was literally how we did that.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out and we made face-to-face contact. I mean, we had a phone, but with a cord on it on a wall.
Mm-hmm.
But we had limitations on how often we could use it. But then even that was kind of weird because it's like you're calling the house and you usually get the parent. And so I didn't even spend much time on the phone. It was usually ride your bike over, walk down the alleyway, knock on someone's door, and then we spent time together.
Mm-hmm.
And we played.
Right.
And then when I was home, we spent time together as a family playing games and just talking. And so much of that is very different. But I think that probably ingrained in me the desire to have good quality relationships. And it's always been the case.
Yeah. It's interesting when you bring that up because when you think about even just our childhood, now we're all adults in this room, so we're all very mature, right? I mean, we've all got so much wisdom now that we're older and all those kinds of things. But when you're little, making friends was so easy. I mean, I rarely had a day where when I would pick up my kids from school, or when I got home from work and they were there, we're talking over dinner or what have you, and they would say, "Dad, I made a new friend today." And it was because they just happened to go down a slide together, right? Or because they just happened to talk to one another on the playground, and all of a sudden they became friends.
Right.
And there's just this innocence that comes with children and being able to, create friendships. But then slowly but surely, as we begin to get older and get into, the older elementary years, and then into junior high, middle school, high school, and into college, we begin to become a little bit more self-conscious, a little bit more self-aware, and then we're unwilling to put ourselves out there.
Yeah.
And I think that muscle of developing friendships stops getting worked out.
Yeah.
And then that continues to follow us all the way into our adulthood. And then we begin to think about, well, how do I make a friend? And will people even like me? Because at the end of the day, Jeff, I mean, I'm sure that you would concur with this, is we all have the same basic needs. And that's to be loved, to be accepted, to be known. We all enter every single day wondering, am I going to say something dumb today? Am I going to have something in between my teeth that I'm unaware of? Am I going to get invited to lunch or happy hour or whatever? And we just want community. At the end of the day, we want community because while we were created, obviously, for a relationship with God, we were also created for a relationship with others. And sometimes, at least I know for me, I can get really hung up on, well, what if I'm not who I need to be for this person or who they want me to be, which then causes me to become more introspective, more isolated because I fear what could happen if I'm not that person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think the question for us, I mean, as we look at it, and even just the title of our conversation of, the importance of finding your people,
Right.
and building community, I think one of those questions is, well, how do we do that? How do we even find our people? Because oftentimes, even if you think about like families, you don't get to pick your family, right? I mean, you're just kind of born into a family. Some of us come from great families. Some of us come from not great families. My story, I mean, similar stories, right? I mean, just not a great family. At least there were some key members of the family that weren't great there. But the reality is that, and sometimes we don't get to pick who we work alongside because we've just been hired. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people within that environment that aren't our people. One of the things when I used to do school assemblies, so the first years that I started RESGEN, so RESGEN is about almost 15 years old now. And the first iteration of it was me traveling all over the country and speaking with teenagers, largely at public middle schools and high schools, because I just figured that sounds like a great place to receive affirmation, is by talking with middle schoolers and high schoolers, because no one loves you like a middle schooler or high schooler, amen? But one of the things that I always talked with middle schoolers and high schoolers about was finding their people, finding the people that were going to be their connection, whether that was in the band, in athletics, in this type of club, because the reality is that it's so easy to do life alone, but we have to be intentional about finding our people and being willing to put ourselves out there.
Yeah. Well, a couple of thoughts that I have listening to that, maybe in reflection, is back to your earlier point. Everybody heard of the one word? Anybody do the one word for a year? A few head nods, yes.
I do.
What's your word for the year?
My word for this year is vision.
And why vision?
Because I just reached the ripe age of 49 years old. So I'm in the final year of this decade.
Yep.
And as I enter into the fifth decade of my life, is that the right math? First decade would be this, second. Yeah, fifth decade. That I just want to say, okay, so it's a new season with being an empty nester, entering into a whole new, walking through some doors that God seems to be opening as far as RESGEN is concerned, with so much more, many more open doors as far as like getting into speaking in corporations, one-on-one coaching, retreats, different things like that. And so my focus for this year is, how am I really answering that question? What is God's vision for myself personally, my marriage, my relationship with my adult kids, and then my work? And what is his vision for that? How can I, and then what is my vision? Are those visions unified and moving forward from there?
Mm-hmm. Now I thought of something as you were kind of explaining that. That is actually a snippet of a piece of a conversation that Tom and I would have at lunch, which means, yeah, we'll talk about what did you do last weekend, or how was your golf round, or things like that are, to me, kind of a little bit transactional, surface type stuff. Mm-hmm. But we always carve out room for kind of real, vulnerable life stuff. And if you don't, my experience is, if you don't allow that to happen, meaning you don't open yourself up and then also receive kind of the stuff from the other person, you're probably not going to have a real relationship. And my word for the year is kingdom. And the big reason that it came to mind, not because I wanted to share that, but you were talking about portraying who we think someone wants us to be, is it always comes to me, and I've been doing the one word for about 10 years. And I'll get to kind of November and I'll start to think, gosh, I start to get the anxiety of, I got to come up with my word. And God always gives it to me.
Yeah.
Before Christmas. And it's like, it's never even in doubt. It's not like, is it this word or this word? It's like, this is what it is. It's usually through a conversation with somebody or some reading that I'll do, and it'll just become very clear. And I think because we live in a world where we have families, we have careers, we have all these kind of demands at us, we're kind of serving a lot of different people. If we're friends, we can start to put on a coat of who we think people want us to be. Mm-hmm. And for me, I chose this word because I want to be reminded every single day through 2025 that I've got one primary purpose, and that's to serve the Lord. Mm-hmm. And that's for him to be who he wants me to be. And if that is not acceptable to the people that God puts in my life, then that's not my problem. Mm-hmm. God will solve that for me.
Yeah.
And because we can all, by human nature, start to, say, be, act what we think people want us to be, and then we're really not being our true self. And that's the challenge, is being your true self.
Yeah.
On friendships, we kind of bring us back to relationships. I read a book a number of years ago by Bill Hybels called Simplify. If you haven't read it, it's a really, really good one. And it talks about simplifying all areas of your life, whether that be faith, finance, work-life balance. And there's an area in there about friendship. And he talks about, in life, we will have situational friends. That's normal. And none of these friend groups are bad, by the way. Situational friends could be, my kids are all adults now, there were a lot of people when raised my kids in Del Rapids that I thought, these are really good friends of mine. And they were good people. Mm-hmm. And the interesting part is when my kids finished high school, like it almost became crickets with these people. And I thought in my mind, it felt like they're going to be like lifelong friends. Mm-hmm. But they were situational because my kids were in same classes, we were going to sporting events, school events, and so we did stuff together. And it was good. And it doesn't mean those relationships were bad, but you get to recognize them for what they are. They were situational.
Yeah.
Then there's seasonal friends that you'll have for a season. I remember Bill Hybels, the author of this book, who says he had a friend who he thought was a lifelong friend. And after like 25 years, this guy and his wife and their family decided to pull stakes and kind of left the relationship and moved like out to the West Coast. And Bill was really kind of heartbroken about it. And I thought this was a lifelong friend. And what he realized, it was a seasonal friend, but he goes, but that's okay too. Mm-hmm. There's times you will have people who are very, very deep in a relationship, but there may be something that causes a life event or something that causes that to change. And then there's lifelong friends. And you can usually count on one hand the people who are your lifelong friends, and they're there kind of forever, through the thick and through the thin. It doesn't mean that they're better. It just means that God placed them there uniquely. But those are also, I think those lifelong friends, for me, if you're going to have a relationship, the problem with the social media stuff is you can't really invest. I mean, if all Tom and I did was text each other, right, or use any of these other social media platforms to communicate, we really wouldn't have much depth at all. Our roots only go deep when we're face to face. Now, those other things might kind of get you through. I'll give you a little bit of humor. So a few years ago, my kids were, again, remember I've got all adult kids now and 8 grandkids. So they were at Christmas and they were talking about like Snapchat.
Which, by the way, did you notice like when he says, I have 8 kids, or excuse me, I have all adult kids, and I have 8 grandkids, and how much bigger the smile is when he talks about his grandkids. I mean, it's the grandkid thing. I mean, my wife she's eagerly anticipating that role in our life because we want bigger smiles. So anyway, sorry to interrupt. Continue.
But so they're talking about Snapchat, and they're like, and I didn't know. I just kind of heard of it. I didn't know what it was, and so then they're kind of. I feel like I was missing out on some fun, and so my wife showed me how to get Snapchat, and then my kid said, "Oh boy, Dad's on Snapchat. Watch out. This could get interesting." And I really don't like social media. I think it can really suck a lot of valuable time that you could be doing other things that are worthwhile. But there are some benefits. For sure. I think about that's the balance. Like humans develop technology that always has good intentions and good purpose, but we always can tend to overuse and abuse things. Mm-hmm. That's our kind of our yin and our yang.
That's why moderation is the sign of maturity.
Yeah.
And figuring out, what does that look like? Yeah.
I mean, think about like FaceTime and stuff. It allows families to connect that are hundreds and thousands of miles apart. Mm-hmm. And Facebook isn't all bad. Instagram isn't all bad. It can be. These things can become addictive. They can be time consumers. But I'll give you this is a case in point. Last night, I get a snap from. Now I have my notifications turned off because I find that distracting. So my wife said, "Hey, did you see the snap from Dylan?" Dylan's my youngest son, and he's got 2 little boys, 18 months and 4 months. And it was a video of the 18-month-old helping them load laundry into the washing machine. And it just made my night.
Yeah.
And they're teaching him, and he's starting to talk a little bit, and just think, if I didn't have Snapchat, I would have missed that opportunity to. And they just live across town, 15 minutes away. But I felt like I got a heart connection by seeing that video. And then I also got to see my son and my daughter-in-law parenting, mm-hmm. and I love that, and I wouldn't want to miss out on that. Yet I would be really, really bummed out if that's the only way that we really built a relationship was through, technology, videos, and things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that last statement for sure. But with the other thing that I think that you really gave a great example of, Jeff, is that you're also striving to communicate with the important people in your life the way that they also are maybe a little bit more comfortable or acclimated to communicate just because of the culture in which they grow in. Now, I have chosen not to be on things like Snapchat and TikTok only because I don't need one more thing in my life to serve as a distraction. So that's like a boundary line that I've kind of put in place in my life. And I've told my boys, like, this is why I'm not doing that. So, please, if there's something that you want me to see or whatever, text me or, put it on an Instagram reel. I'll see that because I got that or Facebook or what have you. But I think that, and that's as a parent though, and especially like, I think when you're a parent of a teenager, because teens often don't feel super comfortable having a conversation like this all the time, trying to find ways to communicate with your kids specifically in ways that they are comfortable with and staying involved in their lives and in front of them in different ways is so crucial. Mm-hmm. So what I love is that even though and you saying last night I got a snap just made me laugh. I just love that, hearing that from you. But like 2 years ago when you put on it wasn't because you wanted snap. It wasn't because you wanted one more thing. It wasn't because you couldn't wait to have your messages disappear after 24 hours or whatever. It was because you're like, hey, this is a way that I can connect with my kids. Mm-hmm. And not just the only way, but an additional way. Yeah. And I think that is such a crucial point for us to think about is what are all the different ways that we can communicate and stay invested in those key relationships in our lives. Because most likely it's not always going to be able to be one way at all times. It's just whether it's a busy season, whether it's maybe the relationship is struggling a little bit, but that doesn't mean that communication needs to stop. I mean, I will tell you, like, this is something that I have to be super intentional about, especially during this season. The month of January for me is of like the busiest month of my life. Now, Laura would tell you that every month has become the busiest month of my life as of late, but January especially because we're gearing up for what is really at RESGEN's largest event of the year, the Men's Summit, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But so Laura and I were just talking about this very conversation last night in the living room. Is I said, I know you hate this time of year. It's literally what I said to her. And she said, no, I don't hate this time of year. I actually love this time of year. And she goes, because I know what it culminates in. And I get so excited about being a part of that event on Saturday morning and seeing the impact on people's lives and hearing the stories and all that kind of stuff. It's just leading up to that, it is harder because of how busy you are. Mm-hmm. And so I know that so I asked her, I said, how do I do a better job of communicating with you and making you feel that you're a part of something with me, as opposed to I'm just dragging you along? Because I think that that's often the case, especially in those relationships that are close, whether that be our family, which of course includes our spouse, our kids, our parents, especially if you have aging parents. How do we care for our aging parents and stay in communication with them? But then also our friendships, because in our busyness, we can forget the importance of making time for what really matters. And at the end of the day, Jeff, you know this, not because you're at the end of your days. Okay, that's how I said that. But
it's the end of my life, but
but at the end of our days, when we are truly at the end of our days, I don't know one person that has ever said, I wish I would have worked more. I wish I would have had a bigger house. I wish I would have gotten more awards. In fact, can you bring all the awards that I was given into my hospital room? Can you bring my collection of cars? Can you bring, the the number that I have in my bank account, can you just bring that so that I know how much I have? No, what do they say? They say, can you bring those that are most important to me? Because I want to be because that's what matters. But if we haven't spent time investing in those people, in those relationships, family, deep friendships, that kind of stuff, then all we're going to have is those accolades, or the cars, whatever. And at the end of the day, those don't mean anything.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but I've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul. Have you?
I have not yet.
Yeah.
No.
So I've seen it on a meme. That's it, right?
Yeah.
But I've never seen it, and I just think it's such a powerful thing. I actually just got an article yesterday sent to me, and if you'll allow me to look at my phone here for a second, here's why. But it's written by this gal that she works with people that were in their final moments. So she worked in hospice. She worked with people that were kind of experiencing their final days, and so she made a list of the top 5 things that people regretted as they look back on their life. And this is really powerful. Number 1 was that, and this is what you spoke to just a few minutes ago, Jeff. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. That was the most common regret of all. Both genders, different ages, right? Because not everybody is in their final days in their 80s or 90s. It's even younger. Number 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And that was across the board. That came from every male patient. And it's not because they didn't value hard work. It's not because they didn't value the excellence of them when they were working. It was just saying that, man, I invested so much there that it cost me so much other places, and so they didn't do a good job of balancing that, okay? Number 3, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings, that authenticity piece, right? Number 4, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends more.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is, I wish that I had let myself be happier. Instead of spending so much time comparing ourselves to other people, spending so much time, wishing that I had more things instead of being, in gratitude or happy with what I did have. I wish I would have. And I don't know about you, but when I read that yesterday, it caused me to pause. It caused me to pause and process the value that I put in the different things in my life. And it caused me to evaluate, again, like I'm a people person. I'm a relational person, just like you are. That's why we love hanging out. But what it really comes down to is, do I genuinely love people? Like at the core of who I am, do I genuinely love people more than I do whatever I'm pursuing for career, possessions, those types of things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a generality, but men more than women have a hard time building relationships. Men are by nature generally less relational.
And let me give you some data on that real quick, because the latest data says that 80% of men don't have a real friend. 80% of men do not have a close friend for who they could call if they get in trouble.
Yeah.
So anyway, continue your thought.
Well, so this is we're gonna kind of make some fire here, but it's because, so the reason why they then work so hard, even whether it's at their job or they go home and they do something and they're not connecting with their spouse or their family or building a true relationship outside the home, is because that's what they feel they're worth.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of getting things done and getting things done.
100%.
And society says, well, if you're a male, you're supposed to be strong and have it all figured out, never cry, never show any weakness, any of that stuff. So then men will build this kind of armor, if you will, and always look like, hey, I've got life all figured out, and I got no issues, and it's all a lie. They've got fears, they've got problems, they've got issues, and it's a total lie. It's because society keeps telling people that they're supposed to be that way. I'm not only a relational guy, I'm an emotional guy. And so I think I got that from my mother. I know I didn't get it from my father, say it that way.
For sure. Yeah, me too.
Because they are like at both the opposite ends of the spectrums. And my kids got to see that. I remember the first time I saw my dad cry. And it was at his mom's funeral, my grandma's funeral. And I remember like staring at him going, holy crap, I've never seen Dad cry. I mean, like, I think, I got to think about this, like 13, 14 years old. Think about that. For the first time in my life, I saw my dad cry. And I was stunned. And it was weird. And I let my kids see me cry lots of times. Not because of...
The Vikings lost.
Well, that was a lot, but
Seriously,
it continues to be a
man,
lot.
I mean, are we okay right now? Are you and I okay from the other night's loss? I don't think we are.
Let's not talk about that.
Okay. All right. I thought we were being authentic. Okay.
Yeah, please. But because some people here know that I could get into a really long conversation with me of despair and hope.
Right. I know.
Together.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I think I have a suggestion. This is my own learnings, is as you're thinking about your relationships, draw concentric circles. And it's different. The answer is different for everybody. In the middle, in the very bullseye, right, what the most important relationship in your life is, or what you would like it to be. Probably more what you would like it to be. And then the next circle around that is what would be the next most important relationship. Because we do have to have priorities. Not all things are equal in life. That's the reality.
Right.
And do about 3 or 4 concentric circles, and then here's an exercise. I'm kind of just doing this on the fly here. Do what it is today, and then do what you would like it to be, and see if they match up. For me, what I desire it to be, but probably what it isn't all the time, I know it is, I want God in the center. I want that relationship. And unfortunately, he takes the back seat probably more than anybody because I prioritize other things. The next one would be my family. And then my close friends, and then my other friends. And then my experience in life is sometimes like those, it's easy to give your time because you can only have a real relationship if you invest time. But we only have so much time. We have how many seconds in a week? I know you've used this, 80,000, or is that a day?
I don't know. You're putting me on the spot with numbers.
But anyway, it's like we have a fixed number of minutes
Yeah.
in a day and in a week. How are you going to allocate those? That's nobody gets any more or any less in a given day. A life might be different, but
Yeah.
And so where are you going to spend that? And the irony is we will oftentimes sacrifice those closer to the center of the circle to give to those. And that's where I'm kind of at now at my stage of my life. And part of it is being older. You find that your relational circles can grow because of that. Part of that is my position here with Poet, and then my wife has a position that's very kind of public as well. So we then have to balance the relationships together, and that's it. And so I'm probably learning. I'm in the season of learning that it's okay to say no, because if I say yes to some new opportunity, and I get a fair number of requests, people who want to engage with me because they want to, and so my tendency is to say yes. I want to give. I'm a giver. But when I say yes to that, I'm saying no to something else because I only have so much time. So then I have to come back and balance myself to those circles and say, where are my priorities of relationship? Because if God wanted me to spend time with the sea of people that I could, he would have made me capable. And I'm not capable. So then where do I make the most impact?
Right.
So that when I get to the end of the life, to your earlier thing, because we don't get do-overs, and you get to the end of your life, you can say, I feel really good about that. I feel really good about how I gave up myself to my family and how I grew my relationship with God, and then how I really was there as a friend, a real friend, to some people.
Yeah, what you're talking about, because the reality is so many of us, myself included, we say we have an issue with managing our time. And there's all different kinds of programs, books, different things that you can do that can help you with your time management. But the reality is that most of us don't have a time management problem. We have a priority management problem.
Yeah.
because like you said, to your point, we're all given the same amount of time. So it's how are we managing just our priorities and allocation of how we're utilizing that time, and does that represent what our priorities truly are? And are there busier times of our life? Yes, I like the one of the challenges that we have, and I mean, I remember when I started RESGEN, Jeff, my boys were 6 and 9 at the time. That's a high activity time. That's a high time of wanting to be in the home with my boys and all that. But I was starting a nonprofit organization that required me to speak, write, share, travel, do all those things. And there was just some necessary things I had to do and figure out, like, okay, my priority obviously is my kids, but yet I also have this vision, this thing that God has given. We all have careers. We got to figure out, okay, how do we do what we do well and be faithful to the calling that we have in our life and to the job we have and all of those things. But what I always try to do was figure out, okay, if I can't be home all the time for every meal, every night, and all the different things because of my travel, how do I make sure that when I am home, that I am home?
Mm-hmm.
And how am I making sure that one of the things that we established, which was very annoying to my kids when they were teens, they hated it. Dare I say they hated me when I had them do it, was we had no phone zones. We had no phone zones that were designated times of our day, the saying for sure when we're having family dinners, there's not a phone allowed at the kitchen table. Well, yeah, but we're going to operate the music from that. Nope. Set the station ahead of time. Well, but I'm waiting for this text message. You can get it afterwards. No phone zone. Also, one night a week, we would say there's no phones. It's family night. No friends. Nobody else is coming over. I don't care what kind of opportunity they have. We're going to have one night that is designated as family times because we want them to see that our priority is family. We set up Laura and I set up every other week. We're going to have some sort of date night. We're going to have some sort of date night that models for them the importance of our relationship, because at the end of the day, my boys are going to leave someday. And at the end of the day, I also hope they don't move back in. And live in my basement. But
Just downsize your house to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Thankfully, we don't have that large of a house. Sorry, kids, you're out of luck. But I also don't want my mother-in-law to move in. So I might have to fill that bedroom. But anyway, okay.
So you bring up a good point, and I was thinking that for me, my best friend is my wife, Julie. And if you suddenly say, well, if that's the case, and if it's true, if you agree that relationships take time, are you investing in that? And then maybe an exercise for the audience is to think about, do they see their spouse as their best friend? This is the person you committed to spend the rest of your life with. And if you don't, why not? And you don't have to have all the same hobbies and interests and all that to be best friends. It's more about, are you completely raw and open and vulnerable with them? Do they know and then, because if you can't do it there, how can you do it somewhere else? If you can't have that type of relationship with your spouse, how can you have it with someone you're not committed to in a marriage? And
yeah,
and so like our relationship, Tom and I have a men's group. That's if you say that I'm very, very close with him, we're very, very raw, and we made kind of a credo when we formed this, is we share, pretty much everything. That needs to be shared. Obviously, there's some things that are boundaries, whether it's your relationship with your spouse or whatnot. But when we share those things and we get vulnerable and raw, so that's in a vault, and there's a non-judgment zone, right? And there's love involved in terms of, so I know a lot about Tom. That stays right here, and Tom knows a lot about me, and I trust that when we share things and vulnerabilities and fears and sins and everything else.
Yeah.
And I have that same kind of credo. And I would say evaluate that close friend zone and say, do you have that? Can you share those do you have anybody in your life that knows some of your deep, dark secrets, that knows some of your deep, dark fears?
Yeah, I like to put it this way, is that we all need people, we all need to surround ourselves with people that are not impressed by us. Because it's the people that are not impressed by us that'll be honest.
And don't need something from us.
What I mean by that is you're not, I'm not trying, I don't need you to you're worth this to me because,
right.
But
Beyond the relationship
It's beyond the
itself.
relationship, exactly. Where it's like I don't want anything from you,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so like when we have conversations, I never have to say, "Hey, this stays between you and me," because I know that it does. And so having those people in our lives, and then the other thing is surround yourself with people that will defend you in rooms that you're not in,
Mm-hmm.
because they know your character, they know your heart, and they're willing to call you out and say, like, man, Tom, you know what? I see you kind of really lashed out irrationally at your oldest son because he brought home the wrong size. This was honest conversation that a friend had with me. Said he brought home the wrong amount of Chinese food, and you came unglued. You let all your frustration over Chinese food because you thought there wouldn't be enough for the people that we were having over. And he said, "May I remind you that you will be parents of adult children far longer than you'll be parents of children. And you're willing to risk your relationship, not just now, but in the future, over Chinese food?" And I was so grateful that this buddy was willing to call me out on that. To not say, "Okay, Tom probably just didn't get enough sleep last night, or he's tired, or feeling pressure, or whatever." He didn't care. He's like, that's not normal Tom behavior. So I need to call him on that. And when he did, I was like, "Oh, snap. Not Snapchat, but snap.
So,
You're right." And I need to go and ask forgiveness for my son.
yeah.
And the question is, though, Jeff, that I think is so maybe weighing on people's minds is because, yeah, I'd love that. I mean, I meet with dudes specifically all the time. That's my ministry's focused on men. And I mean, yes, we do a marriage event called Date Night Comedy, which again, we're going to talk about in a few minutes as well. But a lot of my time is spent on investing in men. And now God's opened up the doors to do companies, like I said, and all that. But a lot of them say, "Well, how do I find that?" Because it's easy to say, "Hey, we all need it." And, "Oh, you should go find it," and whatever. But then the question always comes down to, well, how do we do it? And I don't know that it's the answer is super easy or it's the same answer straight across the board, because there are personalities represented. People that are more extroverted like you and I and relational in nature, we can probably make friends a little bit easier than others. But yet there's still questions that we may have, whether that be bandwidth or we maybe feel like we're on guard for whatever reason. But the reality is still that we need to put ourselves out there. I was speaking at an event in Minneapolis a couple months ago, and I had a guy come up to me and talk about, he just said, how do I find someone, and this is not highlight me, like I'm not saying that, but he said, how do I find someone like you to be in my life? Because I was invited by this company to speak because of a friendship and relationship of a guy that's within the company. And he said, "So how do I find a relationship like you, like John found in you?" And John and I have been in conversation for like 12 years. One of my greatest friends. We sharpen each other. Was actually just on the phone with him this morning for a little bit. But I said, "You know how it happened? Is he reached out to me with a message on Facebook. And he had heard me speak somewhere, and he had the guts to message me and say, 'Hey, I just wondering,'" and this is where we're going to get into mentorship opportunity conversation, Melissa. But the mentor, he said, "I just wondered if you would be willing to mentor me, if you would just be willing to be in my life." And I said, "Well, who are you?" Like, I don't even know you, whatever. And I said, "Well, here's the deal. Let's have a conversation." So I was up speaking in his neck of the woods about 3 months later, and I said, "Come and find me afterwards, and we'll talk." And basically, all he did was he put himself out there, and I said, "Here's the deal. You just need to know that our relationship will not be transactional." I said, I'm not a transaction guy. I'm a relational guy. He said, "Well, what if like we meet like once a month over the phone, and every time I give a donation to your ministry?" I said, "Do you want to do that? You're welcome to, but it's not going to be tied to me talking with you." because then it becomes transactional. And relationship, it's not a business relationships. Are there business relationships in our life? Of course. But for me, it's about friendship and relationship. So how do you find someone to connect with? It's by putting yourself out there. This guy then said to me, he said, I just don't want to bother people with my problems. I don't want to burden other people with, the stuff that I got going on in my world.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, dude? That's a self-worth statement. Because what you just said there is that you're not worth a relationship. You're not worth being known. You're not worth being a burden to somebody else. And I want you to know that you are worth that. Because every single person has worth. And every single person is worth having other people in their lives that care for them, that know them, that love them, regardless of what's going on in their world. Are those relationships hard to find? Yeah, they are. But just because it's hard doesn't mean that you don't do it. On the corner of my desk in my office is a Staples Easy button. Do you remember those commercials, the Staples Easy button? So I have one of those on the corner of my desk. And you know what happens when I push it? Nothing. Because there is no easy button. But yet, we so desperately want stuff to be easy, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is
Yeah.
most of the things worth having take work and hard work at that.
Yeah.
And so putting yourself out there, allowing yourself to be open to rejection. And I know, especially in a world where we have felt pain, we have felt brokenness, we have felt rejection in the past, we fear feeling that again. But when we fear feeling that again to the point of where we isolate ourselves, then we're robbing ourselves of the joy that comes from relationships. That's a joy that can't come from anything else, because that is what the potential is to last.
Yeah.
And when you think about just the opportunities that we have, and you just said, I love what you just said about the concentric circles. And one of the things that you'd say is like, that I've heard asked in those types of conversations is, what would you say to the 20-year-old you? What would you say to the 30-year-old you? What would you say to the 40-year-old you, right? And then now, who are those 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds that you can go and say that to?
Yep.
That you can walk alongside. But that takes us understanding that, we have something to give too.
Yeah.
Which a lot of times, again, self-worth statement says, I don't really know that I have much to give. I only do this for a living. I only live in this neighborhood. I come from a broken home with a dad in prison his entire teenage years and into his early 20s. What do I really have to offer someone else? Well, you offer something that they don't have right now, and that's 20 more years of experience. 20 more years of going through storms in your life and making through those storms. 20 years of hurts, habits, and hangups. I mean, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And so I would just encourage you, I know we got to bring this to a close, but I would just encourage you to evaluate, like you said, Jeff, I think so good. Evaluate the role that relationships truly play in your life. The role that each relationship plays in your life, and then figure out where do I need to prioritize those relationships? And then secondly, looking at your own life and saying, man, you know what? I want to make relationships a little more priority. Now here's how I'm going to do that. And you may not be able to come up with that on your own. That's going to probably be conversations that you have with people maybe that you rub shoulders with, or that people are already in your relational world. But don't be afraid to ask those questions, because we're only going to be helped as much as we're willing to be honest. And so if we're honest with where we're currently at, that means that we can now be helped to take us to where we want to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I've got some kind of closing thoughts as well on all this spaces. I believe, doesn't mean you have to believe it, I believe that if your spouse isn't your best friend, then you may want to evaluate your marriage. I also believe that if your spouse is your best friend, that you should have a friend, a really close friend outside of that, because you need multiple perspectives in your life. And as great as the spouse is, they see you differently. And so it's just good to get different perspective. And by the way, that other best friend, it doesn't have to be somebody. It could be your brother. It could be your dad. It could be your mom. It could be, so I think it doesn't have to be a non-family member, but there should be somebody else that you consider a best friend. And then I would say if people are thinking currently about, well, gosh, I wonder who my real close friends are, and you're rattling through names in your head, here's a way to test that relationship. Approach them in the near future and say, hey, Tom, what do you see about me that you think I don't know about myself? And see if they're willing to answer that. Because if they're not, I guarantee you that everybody that's really close to you in your life sees something about you that they would love to tell you, but they don't have the courage, or you haven't set up the platform for them to share at a deep level. And that's a way to kind of wade into that, is to test who that person is, what's the status of the relationship. And then maybe you just broach it and say, would you like to take our relationship to the next level? And they say, well, what does that mean? I mean, it's like, I think, look, we have a lot of fun together and we share, but there's probably some things I haven't shared with you, and I'd be willing to go there if you want to go there. But if we do that, these are the ground rules we have to have. And then you'll know, and you'll be able to start doing inventory on the relationships in your life.
Yeah. Well, brother, this has been so good. I know that we probably do need to wrap up. It's going to be lunchtime, so I'm sure everybody's like, come on now, let's go. We got lunch to have. So, but one of the things I'm so grateful for is the depth of relationship I've been able to have with Poet over the years. That began, that would have been 2016 for sure. 2015. It's almost 10 years of relationship with this organization, and I'm just so grateful for the depth of that. And it's been fun to partner with the Poet in so many different ways, coming and investing in your people, and you investing in RESGEN in different ways as well. And so thank you again for that. And one of those opportunities that Poet has joined up with us in is putting on events like the RESGEN Men's Summit and our couples event, Date Night Comedy. And so real quick, we're going to take a look at the 1 minute and 15 second promo video for this year's Men's Summit. And then talk a little bit about briefly about Poet's, what they're offering to all of Poet's employees for that event. And then also highlight our marriage event coming up. So you can take a look at this quick video.
Push pause for a moment and think. What if as a man you could live with more confidence, more intentionality, and more heart than ever before? And what if by better understanding God's heart, you could have greater clarity, both in how God sees you and the purpose He has for your life? Join thousands of men for a half-day event that will engage, equip, and encourage you to be a man who is all heart.
All right, so what you just saw there is kind of RESGEN's marquee event that we do each year called the RESGEN Men's Summit. This is the 9th year that we're putting on this event. We host it here at Central Church in Sioux Falls, and we have 1,150 men that come. That's the capacity of the place, and it's sold out each of the last couple years. And then we also have simulcast sites around the country, and also stream at home opportunities. And if for the guys in the room, if you have not been a part of the Men's Summit, I cannot encourage you enough to come be a part of it. Jeff's come, almost every year to it. When there's only been, I think, 1 or 2 that you've been out of town.
And I was there the first year.
The very
which was
first
what
year.
What year?
2016, our very first year, Jeff was there.
120 people.
123 guys, and now it's grown to 1,150 men and over 20 simulcast sites around the country. We also have, like I said, stream at home. You can stream it wherever you're at. The great thing about this event, and then also gals, if you're connected to a dude, I can't encourage you enough to encourage them to go. Maybe don't say, hey, you're going to this, but say,
Probably
hey,
don't say you probably need
to go. But and the great thing is Poet says, hey, they're investing in helping make the event happen, but then they also want to invest in helping you go. And so we already make it crazy affordable at only $40 for the quality of the event that we put it on, because we don't want money to get in the way of anybody coming. But Poet says, hey, we're going to take it one step further, and we're going to help you even more. And so each guy that's a part of Poet, you can just enter the code POET25 when you go and get your ticket at resgen.org. If you are streaming at home, we're at all the different sites around the country that Poet has. You can use that same code, and Poet will cover half of the cost. So it only costs you $20. You're investing a little bit, investing about $20 and 5 hours of your time. But I promise you, if you give me 5 hours on a Saturday, you will walk out of there just influenced and set to go for the rest of the year. Every year I have guys say, when I pulled into the parking lot, I wanted to drive right back out because I didn't want to go in. But I'm so glad that I did. I had guys come that were forced to come by their friends that stopped me last year, a week after the event. He stopped me in the gym locker room and said, I was forced to go by my friend, and I cannot wait to force my friends to go with me next year. That's the kind of just kind of fun that we have there. We laugh. Yes, we do talk about just dude stuff. So anyway, can't encourage you enough to be a part of that. The only thing that Poet asks is that you don't go in and go like 10 tickets and hand them out to everybody. It's just kind of one ticket per employee, whether you are the spouse of an employee or a dude that works at Poet. But would love to have as many Poet employees and as much Poet representation there as possible, because I feel like I'm one of you. I feel like I'm a part of the Poet family, and I'm so grateful to be adopted into your family in the way that I have. And so I'm hopeful that you can come be a part of it. In addition to that, 1 month later, we do an event called Date Night Comedy. And it's on Thursday night and Friday night. And really the whole purpose of this, am I in charge of the clicker? Oh, for crying in a bucket. This is what I was talking about, Cole. I knew that. I would say there's the men's thing. Okay, there's. I'm so bad at that. Okay, here's the date night piece. Same website to go. The whole goal of this is to get couples to laugh together. Are you going to walk away with some tools or resources and some helps for your relationships and your marriages? 100%. But you will laugh the entire time, and all of a sudden you're going to learn a little something that's going to help you as you continue to grow your relationship and friendship with your spouse and significant other in your life. And so all this information is at the website, resgen.org. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for you, our friendship, our years of friendship and sharpening one another. Thank you for allowing us to come and be a part of this time, and you being a part of our conversation. Hopefully you took one or two nuggets away that you could at least marinate in. If it was a waste of your time, then I'm sorry. But hopefully it was something that was fruitful, and I loved our time with you. So with that, God bless you. Thank you for joining us, all the simulcast people out there as well. And you can get all your stuff about the tickets at resgen.org.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Giving Life Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the fireside chat between Jeff and I. If you found our conversation helpful, I encourage you to share it with others in your relational world that may find it helpful as well. Don't forget to head to resgen.org to grab your date night tickets before they sell out, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others. We'll see you soon.